Here we are on our next section of lesson 36-2, and we're going to be covering question number 5. Question number 5. On the previous slide, you should have seen a paragraph that talked about the difference between the MAD formula and the standard deviation formula. And this time we're going to be talking about battery talk times, the length of how long a battery would last for our talk times in hours. So we have the first battery would be 7 hours. The second battery lasts 10 hours. The third battery lasts 8.1 hours. And the last battery lasts 9.32 hours. Now, there are a couple of questions that it asks here. It first asks us to sum this column up. It tells us that our mean is 8.605. This actually came from the previous slide, but we're going to talk about how they got that in a little bit later in this video. Then it asks us to do that deviation again. Again, we're going to take our value of 7 and subtract our mean, which is this 8.605. That's all the way down. And after we get this column, remember to sum them up, add them together. And then to find the standard deviation, however, we're going to use this minus this and then square it. So again, we're going to take 7 minus the 8.605 and then square that value. Don't forget to sum, okay? Here, it says when you find the mean absolute deviation, you're going to take whatever's in this bottom and you're going to divide by n. And my n in this case is going to be 4 because we're looking at 4 different battery lives. Whereas in our standard deviation, we're going to do the square root of this number divided by 1 less than what our n is. So if we're looking at 4 battery lives, 4 minus 1 would be 3. So when we sum this up, we're going to take the sum here, divide by 3, and then do the square root. So you and your table mates or your classmates will have 7 minutes to attempt to complete this table. Pause your video now. As you can see, the table for number 5 has now been filled out. I first found the sum of the values that I was dealing with. And if I divided this 34.42 by 4, because there are 4 terms, that would have given us this mean of 8.605. So then what I did was I did 7 minus 8.605, did the absolute value, took that answer and squared it to get this last column. Did the same thing with 10 and 8.605, squared it. 8.10 and 8.605, found that answer and then squared it. 9.32 minus 8.605, take that number and then square it. Then I found these 2 columns separately. I summed this up, I added those all together. I then summed this up, added those all together. Now, for the mean absolute deviation, I'm looking at this column. I take the 422 and it says divide by my n. Well, there were 4 values in this data set, so I divide by 4. That gives me 1.055. Standard deviation, however, because we square it, we have to also square root of it. That's that reciprocal part there, or the inverse operation. And this time it says divide by 1 less than your value set. So we have 4 values, we're going to divide by 3. Now, this came out to be like 1.327692234. It kept going. So I just rounded that off to make it kind of the same amount of digits. So the 3 digits behind the decimal again. Now, just to talk a little highlight here. Our mean absolute deviation is where we find the absolute deviation, divide by the number of items, and then that's our mean absolute deviation. However, with the standard deviation, remember that we take that absolute deviation, square the value, and then divide by one less than the number of items in the set, and then do the square root of that. So it's a very lengthy process. So we won't do this often, but just to kind of get our hands kind of familiar with it. On to your debriefing question.